Hey guys, Lex here again, and today we're going over my Spear and Shield Bleed Warrior. I know it's late in the league and most of you are likely playing the Mirage League and Path of Exile 1, which seems like such a cool update from what I've seen, and it hopefully serves as a preview for some of the endgame changes we can expect in Path of Exile 2, as a lot of us are saying. But for me guys, I'm just sticking with the game that I know best, which is Path of Exile 2 obviously, and I've always wanted to make a Spear and Shield build work on the Warrior, not just for 300 reasons or anything, but I thought it'd be cool to create a big physical damage and bleed magnitude focused shield warrior that was also tanky at the same time. This is partially in preparation for axes, which, I mean, I'm probably coping here, but I hope to see in 0.5. I mean, obviously swords should come first because those are way overdue, but I myself am just as excited for axes, so maybe those will make an appearance. And looking at some bits and pieces from some of the in-game files, it looks like axes might also lean into bleeds in some way, so I wanted to up my knowledge with bleed tech in this build. Spears are clearly mostly dexterity weapons, but if axes become anything like they are in Path of Exile 1, they will likely be strength dex weapons with a much heavier leaning in strength alongside this bleed focus, which is great since I prefer playing strength characters anyway, and this build will likely become stronger without having to fork over so much of the focus into dexterity if bleed axes become a thing. Anyways, that's about it. Let's get into the video. I'll mostly go over the spear and shield build here, but I'll sprinkle in some ideas about axes where relevant as well. Alright, so if you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I tend to run Avatar Fire Shield Warriors that deal some pretty heavy ignite damage to burn down Pinnacle Bosses, but the story here is a little bit different. Those other builds were pretty much pure shield builds, but this time around we're actually getting a fair bit of use out of our weapon. It feels like a true sword and board build. Well, you know, spear and board, but you know what I mean. I'll say that clearing here feels a little stronger than that Avatar Fire build because we're using that ever popular Herald of Blood, Bursting Plague, Poison, Chaining combo that is so efficient for bleed builds. And I'm sure some of you have run that combo before, but from what I've seen with a lot of those build videos, I found the single target pinnacle killing damage a bit lacking, which is something that I've tried to fix here with this build and the absurd bleeds that it can inflict. To start, clearing works like this. It's a mixture of Rake and tapping Resonating Shield, and I mean, that's pretty much it, to be honest. As a Warbringer running Turtle Charm this time around, you are able to stack up your passive block up to 75% at the cost of taking 20% from all blocked hits, which makes clearing with Rake feel pretty safe overall. You're honestly shrugging off most damage with armor and passive block and don't have to worry about channeling active block as much like with my other builds. One note about Rake, many of you likely know this by now, but you actually get a lot of extra damage out of it if you use it from a range and get the dash to occur, up to 130% increased damage if you've maxed out the gem quality, so definitely try to zoom at groups with this at a range and even past monsters if you are able. Sometimes this feels a little wonky as you can get kind of body blocked when trying to zoom through monsters at some target you want to hit in the back. Would be cool if GGG let this skill phase through monsters a bit more, but I digress. But that's pretty much it. Rake or a tap of 2 of Resonating Shield to start the chain. I throw in a Fortifying Cry for some tougher single targets, or maybe a shield wall if I must make absolutely sure something dies. And with this setup, you'll pretty much have 3 endurance charges while clearing most of the time, so you'll basically get guaranteed crits with Nebulock when you need to burst down a stubborn Abyss Rare or map boss or something. Things get a little more interesting on Pinnacles, as there's a bit of RNG involved with how we deal the big bleed damage, but the RNG is consistent enough for our combo to deal this damage. Might sound a little strange, but let me explain. I start the fight using Fortifying Cry and Resonating Shield, and we're stacking the Uruk's Smelting debuff over and over since the way these skills are socketed allows us to fully break armor over and over, as you'll see in the skills section of this video. We also have a 20% chance to gain an endurance charge each time we fully break armor, so you will likely get at least 1 out of this process, but we also have Magma Barrier equipped for a more assured way to get some as well. Once I have fully stacked the Uruk's Smelting debuff, I stop spamming Fortifying Cry, I fully break the boss's armor with Resonating Shield one more time, and then it's time for the classic Shield Wall Fortifying Cry combo, which should hit like a veritable truck if this is set up properly. I'll often follow this up with another Shield Wall if there's time, or some more Fortifying Cry Resonating spam if there isn't as much time, as both of these combos have a fair chance to aggravate bleeding based on our passive skill tree. That aggravated bleeding will deal lots of damage with this build. And then we have Blood Hunt, which acts as a strong finisher once the boss has suffered a bunch of blood loss. It basically just deals 25% of the damage inflicted by your bleeds on your target with some bonus damage on top. Very potent if there is a lot of blood loss on the health bar, though do keep in mind that this does consume any current bleeding effects on the target, so if you have a strong bleed going on and you're not quite sure sure that you'll finish the target with Blood Hunt, it's probably better to just wait a bit longer. There is one weakness to endgame activities on this build, and that is unfortunately Simulacrum. We rely on corpses to deal a ton of our clearing damage, and none of these Simulacrum mobs leave behind corpses, so we lose out on both the Blood Explosion from Herald of Blood and the Plague Burst explosion from the support gem. You could probably run this with some gem swapping and relying more on shield wall spam, but as it stands, I would recommend not trying to farm Simulacrum with this setup. My previous Avatar Fire Shield Wall build is a lot better for it. So yeah, very strong build in the endgame, except for Simulacrum. Just bear that in mind. It does have great clear for all the other activities though, and some really solid Pinnacle nuking damage, so I'm kinda okay with just running those instead. And we'll have to see what axes bring as a replacement for Rake, if anything, because that skill is feeling pretty good at the moment. But for now, let's go over the skill gems and the supports just to see how this all works. Alright, let's go through the skill gems starting with Rake. Honestly, just socketed this for a bunch of physical damage, though one note is that we're running Deep Cuts 2 for more bleed magnitude and less hit damage so that we aren't killing things too quickly. The more bleed damage targets suffer before they die, the stronger your Herald of Blood chains will be, so you actually want things to die from mostly bleeding damage rather than hits here, so it'll be kind of up to you to find that support gem balance. And real quick, as an axe user, I think the skill most likely to replace this would be what is currently labeled as Axe Chop. This is obviously subject to change, but from its current description, it seems like it is a clearing skill. It reads, bring your axe down in a sweeping slash, creating a slash along a line in the ground with a chance to cause bleeding. Seems like it could be good, though I'm not sure if I like the chance to cause bleeding portion. With Rake, we have 100% chance, so hopefully GGG buffs that portion of the ability before its implementation. Ancestral Call is another important support gem for this skill because it allows you to create, little copies of yourself that will apply Rake to multiple targets and will start multiple chains. It really helps with clearing, and we have a few points on the passive skill tree that also boost this up a little further. And I'm going to take off my sweater real quick because I'm burning up. I'm way too hot. Resonating Shield next, socketed with gems to make sure it bleeds consistently. Auric Smelting, as we mentioned earlier, to stack that permanent physical damage debuff on bosses. Poison 3 to help more consistently apply poisons for our bursting plague chaining. Rage 3 for some attack speed and rage stacks, obviously. And then Armor Break 3, which is what gives us that 20% chance to gain endurance charges every time we fully break a target's armor. Oh, and real quick, this is set to weapon set 1, which is the set that my spear is set to, so just a note there. There are some skills that are set to specific weapon sets, and you want to keep them that way for the, boss and clearing combos. Fortifying Cry next, socketed in a way to, again, ensure bleeding, crank up its damage, and increase its critical damage bonus by a large margin with super critical here, which reduces your crit chance as well, but we don't care about that since Nebulok lets us crit 100% of the time if we've got some endurance charges. Speaking of which, it's also socketed with Exploit Weakness to consume fully broken armor, and this is how we get those Auric Smelting stacks up with Resonating Shield. And this skill, we shoot out shield waves from Fortifying Cry as we use Resonating Shield, so we can loop both breaking armor and consuming it with basically one skill. And again, we get that 20% to gain an endurance charge every time we fully break armor, so this helps us a bit with Nebulok setups on tough single targets like Pinnacles. Oh, and this skill is not set to any specific weapon set. I'll mention if a skill is set to a specific weapon set, and if I don't, just assume it's set to both. Shield Wall next, straightforward as hell, hits crazy hard, and is the conduit for your Fortifying Cry shotgun effect, which honestly hits harder than this skill does, I think. I just socketed this one for ensured bleed again, lots of physical damage, and super critical again for Nebulok, and yeah, mostly using this for boss fights and sometimes tough rares. And just as an extra note, we're using Shield Wall for those high priority targets because we're not stacking a ton of skill speed with this. Again, you want to use those Shield Walls for the big nukes. We're not running like a Shield Wall for all purposes build here. That'll help with clearing and bossing. We're kind of splitting it up here. Oh, and real quick, I'm actually recording this in post because I forgot to say it. Very important to set Shield Wall to weapon set 2. That is kind of what sets off the combo. When you put down the Shield Wall, you activate all of your weapon set 2 passives on the passive skill tree and gives us that boss killing damage. So it's very important to set Shield Wall to weapon set 2. Blood Hunt is next, so this is an interesting one, probably the most niche ability out of the bunch, but it is strong when you get an aggravated bleed off on a boss or rare. This basically deals 25% of the total damage dealt by your bleeds on the target, so I will sometimes use this to burst down targets if they suffer a bunch of bleeding. Just keep an eye on that dark red part of the health bar. The bigger it is, the harder this will hit. Again though, as I mentioned earlier, you will consume all of your current bleeding effects on the target when you use this, so just make sure you are going to to finish your target off, or you are okay with getting rid of whatever bleed effects are currently on the target when you use this. Last thing I'll say, if you wanted to run something other than Blood Hunt, you probably could. I would recommend a way of getting shock on your targets, most likely by running a companion, or if you get your ailment chance high enough, perhaps a lightning spear. You may see a few clips here where I had that skill equipped and it works well enough, but I didn't have enough ailment chance to make it consistent is all, so I stopped using it. Magma Barrier. So this one isn't really about the damage, it's about the endurance charge generation, which it inherently generates anytime you successfully trigger the skill. This is somewhat moveset dependent, but all bosses have moves that will trigger this. It'll just take knowledge and knowing which ones those are. Usually super basic non-red attack animations, though again, there might be some red ones you can block too. If you've seen my recent "There's Something Wrong with Block" video. Aside from that, just socket it in a way to spread its fairly strong ignite to assist in clearing, though truth be told, I do think you could probably find some other utility-centric sockets here, since this isn't anywhere near the main way that you clear. Definitely play around with some of these sockets, because the most important one is the charge profusion effect to generate more endurance charges. Herald of Blood, socketed predictably with the bleed, bursting plague, poison, and AoE stuff for chaining. I won't spend too much time here, as most of you probably know how this chain works, but to sum up, the Herald deals physical damage in an AoE when a bleeding enemy dies based on the blood loss it suffered, and this explosion has a high chance to aggravate existing bleeds on targets it hits, but it cannot inflict bleeding itself. However, when socketed with Bursting Plague, if the skill deals poison damage to enemies before they die, they will burst with another physical damage explosion due to this specific support gem, and this explosion can deal bleeding, so you can set off some chain reactions with this back and forth exploding enemies inflicting bleeds and poisons over and over. Very strong interaction for clearing and feels great once you try it out. Scavenge plating is pretty straightforward. We are breaking armor enough to benefit from the full stacks while doing most activities, mapping, bossing, etc. And then Herald of Plague to help that chaining with Herald of Blood by allowing the strongest poisons you've inflicted to spread. So those are the skills in a nutshell. I'll have a Mobalytics build guide linked below, as well as a PoE Ninja link on this one. But for now, let's talk about the passive skill tree. Alright, as usual, let's mouse over the whole thing here. This took some experimenting and min-maxing to make work the way I wanted it to. It was honestly kind of tough to get the bleed damage to a place I thought was impressive, but we eventually got there without sacrificing stats in too many other areas. We're basically just prioritizing things that support our leech to sustain our life, defensive stats like block and armor, more life obviously where we can grab it, alongside the stronger damage and utility nodes where we can afford to as we path to these bleeding support clusters. But anyways, let's talk about the Ascendancy first. As always, I do think this build could also work well on Titan, but honestly, being able to spam Fortifying Cry with no worry of its cooldown or consuming endurance charges is a huge boon, especially since endurance charge maintenance is so important during Pinnacle boss fights on this build. And it lets us socket Fortifying Cry with more damage support gems, since we don't have to worry about using sockets to bypass the cooldown, with Rage via the Enraged War Cry and Raging War Cry. And funnily enough, I find the Exploding Corpses portion of Warcaller's Bellow to actually help us out with single target damage while we're mapping against some of those stubborn rares or like Abyss rares. Sometimes you just shout and a bunch of corpses explode near them and they end up dying. It's actually pretty strong. Then we go with this branch here for a bunch of innate block on our shields, and Turtle Charm, which makes us take 20% of damage from all blocked hits, but our block cap is now 75%. And truth be told, I am actually not at block cap yet. I'm in the higher 60s, I believe, but obviously reach it however you can. I just have to find some better jewels and most likely prioritize a few passive skill tree points towards block. But right now I find that this is working for me, and I'll mention a notable passive in a bit that can help you hit the cap a lot easier as well. But yeah, aside from that, 20% damage is honestly pretty negligible. We're leeching a lot from our attack, so this is damage that is easily shrugged off, and we have a pretty sizable life pool relative to how much armor we're stacking here as well. And honestly, I'm going with Anvil's Weight here because I love the passive armor break, and it makes maintaining scavenge plating more mindless and makes your clear chains a little stronger, since all of those explosions armor break too. Kind of fun to see. However, you could totally go for Jade Heritage here too for the extra armor and 10% flat physical damage reduction. Honestly, a pretty strong option if you want to be even tankier, and the active is there too, I guess, but I find myself not using it that much. Anyways, onto the tree. I'm keeping it pretty bare bones close to the start here, but I picked up some of the more useful notables in my eyes as far as block and AoE goes here, but we have our first important clusters down here. Obviously, we want to grab all the bleed magnitude that we can, so we have here, first and foremost, this particular bleed cluster. It is a little inefficient though, as we have a bunch of bleed chance kind of baked in here that's unavoidable, and we don't really need bleed chance, so it's a little inefficient, but we need the magnitude where we can get it. Down here we have these shield nodes that increase attack damage while holding a shield. Fine enough, but it's obviously Lay Siege we're after. I just find this to be a pretty efficient use of our passive skill tree points damage-wise, even without hitting the exact 75% block cap, though again, fairly open to experimentation if you have not gone Turtle Charm or something and you only have 50% max block. Lay Siege becomes a little less useful, and you can like potentially free up these points to place elsewhere. I mean, that's totally viable too. Attack speed and dex cluster here, useful for all of our skills, but especially shield wall. Some leech here. I may or may not grab this notable. I was using it before, but honestly didn't feel like I needed it, so still undecided on it. I'm leeching and surviving plenty on juice maps anyways. And this short crit damage bonus to the notable here, I'm not always stunning bosses, but when I am, you get a lot more out of this node. But point for point, this is still a strong branch with our boss killing Nebulock weapon set. Pathing over here to these nodes, if you play heavy armor wearing characters, you are likely familiar with these nodes by now, or should be. These will increase your movement speed by a ton by removing the movement speed penalty from all armor with this notable. And then we just have straight movement speed increases on this short branch with immune to hinder and maim on this notable. Both pretty common movement speed slows, so honestly, very useful all around for clearing, and is why that these are set to weapon set 1, which is our clearing set. Bleeding chance and magnitude nodes all the way down to this aggravate node, mostly to aggravate bleeds on bosses with the number of attacks we're hitting them with after a big shield wall, but also fairly useful on the field against those stubborn rares, though you could probably argue that this notable could be set to weapon set 2 right now, but those are mostly locked in place for me. Heart of the Well Diamond here with a bunch of relevant stats. I think more crit damage bonus where you can get it is useful, so we have that roll here. Chance to aggravate is also nice since we really want to aggravate our strongest bleeds. Chance for ailments is also decent for the poison we want to spread as we are clearing, and the skill speed increase near uniques and rares is obviously super useful for getting those shield walls down faster. Obviously you don't need those exact rolls, but I do think that the crit damage and skill speed are the two most useful ones here, so consider that for one of these. And then down here at the end of this line is this bleed cluster. Honestly, one of the more useful ones, because aside from the 5% chance here, the rest are very useful. Magnitude of bleeding, increased attack against bleeding targets, and then bleeds deal damage 10% faster. The accuracy is a nice bonus on top, but the 10% faster bleed out is very strong for this build. Jumping over here, a bunch of useful clusters. Classic rage branch here that I like grabbing for more maximum rage, and then the weapon set 1 branch here for more stun threshold from rage stacks, which pretty much solves any stun threshold problems as you are gaining rage, both while clearing and in boss fights. Down here we grab these leech and physical damage nodes up to goring, losing a bit of maximum life here for a lot of leech and a big chunk of physical damage. Honestly, worth the price with this build in my opinion. And then this branch to tempered defenses. Truth be told, I'm not totally sold on this because I'm not even stacking a ton of elemental damage reduction with armor, and these are set to weapon set 1 because I just didn't find this set of defenses useful against bosses. The life stacking is more relevant there. But if you've been paying any sort of attention, you'll notice a time lost jewel is missing here, and this will make more sense as to why I grabbed all of these. Out of all the jewel sockets on this passive skill tree currently, it makes most sense to place the time lost ruby here. I just wanted to keep it removed so that the nodes were easier to read, but this is mostly granting us bonuses with notables, blocks, bleed magnitudes, skill effect, which is kind of useless to be honest, but those former two are more important, and then leech from small passives. Overall, a moderately useful one. Could probably go shopping for a better one. If you wanted to go constricting command on this build, you could also get a lot of value from a time lost gem here from the surrounded nodes, obviously, so that's another direction that you could totally take this build. Up here, we grab all these ancestral boosted nodes for our rake specifically. This helps our clearing out a lot since this helps us greatly with damage and AoE. And again, ancestrally boosted rakes happen in pretty frequently, so I find this very useful. Armor break nodes here, which helps us break more armor and deal more damage against fully armor broken targets, but really these two notables are a very strong combo for Pinnacles if you are able to time a full armor break correctly. I kid you not, if you fully armor break a Pinnacle like the Expedition boss or even Uber Arbiter, you can weaken or in some cases totally bypass their entire phase 2 because they can't regenerate health when this debuff is active on them, which is what they need to do for a full health bar before phase 2 begins. Doesn't take a lot of practice to get this right, and the effective damage, I guess I'd call it, is pretty huge considering you are preventing an absurd amount of health regen for their second phase. Then we have these two strong branches here, magnitude for both weapon sets to assist with clearing and bossing, while the extra attack damage branch here is for the second weapon set only. Then we have this critical damage bonus branch up here for Nebulock, and since we're in the neighborhood, we might as well grab B for some health and honestly stat requirements on skills, and then this little interesting branch. So the chance to bleed and 10% damage for empowered attacks small passives are a little lackluster, but this one here is the one that we're after. 20% chance for empowered attacks to aggravate bleeding alongside the obviously useful 30% increased empowered attack damage. So 20% chance means 1 in every 5-ish empowered attacks will aggravate bleeding, disregarding the other sources of aggravate chance we have currently. However, every time we shield wall and fortifying cry, we're shooting out about 4-ish shield waves at the moment, which gives that combo a very high chance to aggravate bleeding on targets, which is why I'll often follow up my endurance charge Nebula critical shield walls with just like another plain shield wall combo just to try and aggravate that bleeding. Obviously, you may not always be able to pull off those follow-ups, and I'm not even sure that the aggravate chance even works that way if like the 4 shield walls are considered separate chances of aggravate, or if they're all considered one attack. Feels like they are considered separate chances because I notice it's pretty consistent, but again, I can't say that for sure. Either way, it's been working pretty consistently for me, so I'm going to guess that those 4 waves are separate chances to aggravate, or I'm just really lucky. Anyways, moving up here, this is a very useful damage branch for anyone using a high armor shield. I have this set to the Nebulock set for more hit damage, though ideally I'd like this to be active for both, so this is something I might play around with more. Oh, and real quick, I hinted at this notable earlier, but Towering Shield, if you're trying to hit block cap, this will help you get there for very little investment. This is like a temporary block buff, but it's active quite often with this build since we are tapping Resonating Shield so often, and we are often blocking attacks. So this will increase your passive block chance by a big percentage, as you can see here, 25%, if you've active blocked recently. We have a From Nothing diamond here, which lets us allocate passives in the radius of resonance over here. And this is all for Nebulock, just pure critical damage bonus nodes. Super useful, though this jewel is traditionally fairly expensive because this is a popular way to grab what I consider some of the best critical damage nodes in the game, so just keep that in mind. And then back over here, we have Blood Magic. This is a no-brainer. We just don't have to worry about mana at all with this keystone, and we are getting life aplenty with this build. And then last but certainly not least, pathing to this branch over here for, once again, more critical damage bonus for the Nebulock set. Very strong set of nodes. Anyways, that's basically what the passive skill tree looks like, guys. Again, check the build links in the description if you want a more static reference, but next up is the gear. Alright, I'll mouse over while I yap again. I know it's late in the league and this economy is a little outrageous, but I tried my best to reel it in and keep things fairly budget friendly or craftable to see if it could serve as a more realistic league starter or budget build, and honestly I think it can. But truth be told, I have a few pretty pricey pieces here, particularly the amulet. But let's go ahead and start with the spear. This is pretty strong, and I honestly crafted this one. They are quite easy to craft, and I'm going to shout out a fellow content creator by the name of Exiled Rat Lord. He has some great content on his channel, but particularly the spear crafting video I loved. Super easy to follow along with if you want to craft a similar one. We'll link that in the description, and he also has a great explanation on the Bursting Plague, Herald of Blood combo as well, so definitely check those 2 videos out. But yeah, I mean, this has a bit of everything we need, mostly to crank up rake damage and a little bit of blood hunt, I guess, though most of that skills damage comes from the bleed damage you've dealt on the target. But anyways, super easy spear to craft, makes your rakes hit quite hard. Definitely worth it. I do need to corrupt this one though for the extra socket. I think iron runes are probably the way to go, though I may experiment with the endurance charge one also. I wonder if that applies when breaking armor with resonating shield. I'll have to look into that. Then we have the shield. Honestly, whatever stats you basically need, as long as you have the 1k armor or more to hit hard with all of your shield stuff, that's basically it. I do recommend trying to get a flat physical damage reduction roll on this one though. That does help a lot with tankiness. All right, let's talk about the KOTOR of Crimson. Another shout out to my good friend Cal Torak, who ran this really fun leech werewolf build and tipped me off to this one. This basically lets you overleech your life up to 50%, and then you basically increase your life pool by 50% of whatever it is, as long as you are leeching enemies. This means right now I'm close to 5-ish K HP, which is fine. It's been working for me, but if I went harder into life stacking, I could probably get this higher. And yeah, again, Cal's character was getting upwards of like 10k life, so definitely impressive stuff here, and just a strong, unique for life stacking leech builds in general. Nebulok next. Stats don't matter so much on it, but I do think you want one with a higher crit damage bonus roll, and set this to weapon set 2. Just saying that for consistency with the passive skill tree that I showed you. Obviously the shield is also locked to this set from weapon set 1, but yeah, I mean, Farrell's Rune of the Hunt for more boss killing damage, and Greater Rune of Alacrity for faster shield walls. Easy. Gloves I think are important to go over. Obviously you want +2 melee skills on this one for, well, more damage on everything we do, and then life if possible. And this goes for all items here. Grab life rolls and strength rolls where possible, though obviously you'll have to grab some dexterity and intelligence somewhere for our spear skills and the chest piece respectively. But anyways, yeah, life, melee skill, whatever resistances you need, and most importantly, these sockets, Wolf Idol and Courtesan Man's Rune of Cruelty. This gives you a whopping 30% bleed magnitude. Super noticeable, and again, very strong for this particular build. Last thing I'll go over in detail is the amulet. Again, I dropped quite a bunch of divs on this because I could afford to, but one of the bigger challenges of this build is that we're running quite a few spirit gems, and we remove one of our spirit sources by running this unique chest. So amulets are where you can make up for some of the spirit loss, but this means they will likely get quite expensive, knowing we want that and plus 3 melee skill on them. Then obviously from there, percent increased life is strong, then whatever resistances you need. I anointed blood tearing here for more physical damage and more bleed magnitude. Obviously what we want here. And again, yes, that is also a somewhat expensive anointment. So this amulet is something you'll likely have to save up for if you run a character like this earlier in a league. But aside from that, just more life, resistances, fizz damage where you can, a little leech here and there. Breach rings are a little weird, truth be told, because I'm not sure which quality mods I want to go to upgrade on this build. I got to play around with that a little more. I definitely want another flat physical damage roll on this one. But right now this build is feeling pretty tanky and very good at slaying those pinnacles, and it's been super fun, to be honest. But hey, that's going to be it for this build. Hopefully you enjoyed it or learned something. Honestly, I think a axe and shield warrior would be really fun to play, or I might try maybe a pure dual wield axe berserker type build with crimson assault or something like that. That'll probably be viable if I had to guess. But again, check the description box for links to the build and some of those other creators I mentioned. And oh, I'll also leave you with some outro footage of the build in action. But for now, that's going to be it. I will see you in the next one.